Good morning, and welcome to another tour of peplink with Peter West from West Networks. Today I'm going to demonstrate the SD switch and go over some configuration capabilities and features of the switch. In order to add the switch to in control, you're going to click Add Devices. You're going to put in the switch's serial number and hit Add. Once it's added, you'll see it show up right here. Give it a few minutes. If it doesn't show up right away, don't worry. And also, the switch is a smart switch, which means it's going to give itself a default IP address. So if you turn it on and then plug it into your network, you might have to reboot it so that it'll get an IP address. So just be aware that if you don't have that IP address pre-configured using the management interface, then and you're using DHCP, you will need to make sure it gets a DHCP address. So the easiest way is simply just to make sure it's plugged into your network on a DHCP network prior to turning it on. Then you can configure with a static IP or switch the VLANs, anything you want to do with it there. Peplink uses in control to manage its networks. So from in control, you can manage your network settings, you can see your clients, and you can even manage device IP settings. So the first thing you're going to want to do is configure your VLANs the way that you want to have them available to your switches. So if you see I have VLAN 10 there, maybe you could create a VLAN called wireless, or let's say guest wireless, and I could call that VLAN 100. I can tell it to either apply that to all devices with any of the following tags, or all devices with none of the following tags. So for example, if I wanted to apply it only to wireless enabled networks, I could create it, say devices with any of the following tags, and then have a tag that says wireless, and then it would only apply to those. You must give it a default network address. We're going to call it 10.253.100.1. This IP address will only be applied to routers that have this guest network assigned to them. And you can override the default IP address using the device IP settings and in control, or log in and change it once the device has been added. Once again, if you have multiple VLAN 100s set up on your network because you have multiple sites, you might need to change the default IP address. You might need to change the default IP address in the event that you have the same VLAN on multiple different networks. So I'll show you how to do that in a second. So hit save. Now we have our guest wireless on VLAN 100. We have VLAN 10. Let's just change this to corporate network. And let's give this an IP address of 10.253.10.1. Hit save. And so we have our corporate network, our guest network, our management port, our management VLAN, and then you'll see default VLAN 1. This is very important because if you say default VLAN 1, that's going to be your default VLAN for trunking. If you change it to like default VLAN of 10, it'll change your trunking defaults to 10. So I recommend right now just to leave it as a 1 until you're more familiar with the way the routers work. So I'm going to then go in and I can go to device IP settings. And here you can create a CSV of your entire network based on serial numbers. And then you can also do your VLANs. So here is where you could say, I have router number at site A with this serial number. And then here are the IP addresses that I'm going to assign to the different VLANs. And this will override that default IP address. And you just click import. It works really well. We've done this for a couple large installations, and it takes a few seconds to set up and in control with like an Excel spreadsheet, and then once you have it set up, it's great. So now that I've created these two VLANs, I can click on my switch, and let's do an in control tour, and then we'll do a device tour. From the switch, I can see the port 1 is plugged into my internet connection. It's getting an IP address, and you can see it's getting an IP address of 10.254.52.64. That's the IP that's just my network here, and then it's getting a DHCP address for that. You can see I got my 1 gigabit port connected. I have no SFP connected. I can also see that I only have one power connector plugged in. But even though I have only one power connector plugged in, all 3 of my power supplies are still functioning. So that's the neat thing about peplink as well, is you don't have to have both power cords plugged in to get all three of your power supplies working. Um, so from here, you can see where the device is located. You can see default IP address information, and you can run reports against the event log, and you can also see attached clients. Now, this is a brand new switch with nothing plugged into it, so there are no clients to be seen so far. Um, Now, if I were to go plug a device in, give me 1 second. So I just plugged a device into port 2. You should see that come online here in just a few seconds. Now, once again, because my management VLAN, which is my default VLAN that I've assigned as management VLAN 1, it's going to pick up an IP address of 10.254.52 dot something as the network that is connected to this switch. So that's going to be my default VLAN and my default connection, and that's the IP address that this device is going to get. And once again, this is not a router discussion, it's a switch discussion, so we're leaving the routers out of this for right now. Um, so it's detected that there's PoE, the device is booting up, and it's linking at 1 gigabit, and I can see that it's pulling 5.3 watts of power, and it's on my port 2. Now, the peplinks have a couple features that are really nice about them. I can enable several different options like link aggregation. So for example, say if I want to link ag ports 19, 21, and 23, I can go into 19, I can highlight port 19, 20, and 23. I can click edit, and I can enable link aggregation and active or passive mode. And I can name this, I can say server, server 2, or let's call it server 1. And then our And then here I can enable it. I can do PoE, which we're not going to do because it's a server being connected to it. And we're going to give it an access port, and we're going to assign it to my corporate network. So this is going to get a corporate network VLAN 10, and I'm going to hit save and apply it to the switch. And now 19, 21, and 23 have link aggregation active on these ports named server 1. So if I were to click, sorry about that, on 20, 22, and 24, I can do the same thing. I can make them active, call it server 2, disable PoE, access on corporate VLAN, and hit save. And now these are my 2 link ag ports, and if I select on one of these, on any of the ports, all of them are highlighted. So you see if I click on this port, they all get highlighted. If I uncheck, if I click on this one, so it tells me that these are all connected together. So that's it. That's link aggregation. Super easy. Now let's say if I wanted to set up a wireless access point plugged into port 11, and it's going to be on my wireless network. So I can click edit, I can click access, and I can assign this to my guest wireless. Now what's going to happen here is anything connected to this, the access point itself is going to pick up on VLAN 100, and it will get an IP address on the VLAN 100. The other thing you could do is hit trunk, go to and say wireless access point. Now I could say trunk all, and then it will trunk all VLANs. Or I could say custom and say trunk management VLAN and guest wireless, but don't trunk the corporate. And so this will allow VLAN 1 and VLAN 100 to traverse VLAN this port, but not the corporate VLAN. So it really depends on how you want to program your SSIDs. If you want to have a multiple SSIDs, like say if you wanted to have an SSID that was a corporate VLAN SSID, you'd want to trunk your guest wireless and your corporate. So you could say trunk all at that point, right? And that way, the access point would then have SSIDs that are tagged to that particular wireless network. So for the purposes of security and just having a guest wireless network, we're going to say we're doing access point with guest wireless VLAN 100, and we're on port 11. I hit save and hit apply. These routers also support spanning tree. They support RSTP. So there's a lot of features here that we can pull up if we want to within the network or within the switches. But the important thing here is to remember that they're really easy to switch or to manage these switches. You basically are going to have an access port and a trunk port. An access port is going to strip the tags um, on anything leaving the switch and add a tag on anything coming into the switch. So if you plug into port 11, the device plugged into to port 11 would be untagged. So you wouldn't have to manually assign a tag like a computer or a phone. Well, as soon as the traffic hits port 11, it's going to tag the traffic as VLAN 100, and then it can access any other ports that are VLAN 100. So it can transverse to, if we were to, IC2 here, this port 1 is trunk all, which means VLAN 100 can go over the trunk all because we're trunking all. And then on a trunk port, when you have trunk, it's not going to take away or add any VLAN tags. So when you have a trunk port, it's keeping the tags as they are. So if I tag the traffic coming into this port as VLAN 100, and then it leaves on port 1 up to the router, it's going to keep that VLAN 100 tag because I'm not access. So if I made this an access point port, this tag would then be stripped out as it left, and then it would get tagged as untagged, and you would not have any network traffic. So it's really important to remember that when you set an access port type, the data enters the port untagged, leaves the port untagged, but when it enters, it gets tagged at the network that you've asked it to tag, VLAN 100. And then when the switch sends the data back out the port to the device, the VLAN 100 actually gets stripped from it, and it's treated as an untagged. And that way, the device, like I said, once again, the device plugged in doesn't have to have any manual VLAN information associated to it. So if I log into the router and I'm using in control, I can see the ports, I can see what's happening on the router. Once again, I have my management interface. I can see my port IP address. I can see my VLAN IP address that it's currently connected to. I can see the in control interface is port 1 right now. I have my firmware version, kind of some health information going on about the device. If I go into configure, you'll see that everything is going to be kind of like disabled because it says that this configuration is being managed by in control. So my DHCP snooping, my STP, my switch ports, it's all being managed inside in control. And so they want you to manage that inside in control. However, we can override that and take a look at the settings. If I go to my in control, my status, system, and I go down to in control, and I uncheck in control management, hit save. Do not hit apply. You hit apply and you won't have access to the router anymore. I go back to configure. You'll see here now I have all my VLANs, and you can see that these have been assigned by in control. I can then go into my STP configuration. I can create an STP bridge and give it the priority. This field specifies the priority for the routes switch election. So the lower priority is selected as root bridge. So if you have a core router, you'd want to, maybe make that, or core switch, you'd want to make, your top level switch the core switch. DHCP snooping allows you to enable trusted and untrusted modes. So if I turn on DHCP snooping and then I make it default as untrusted, the device may fail to acquire IP address from DHCP server in control if all ports are set to untrusted. So it's, and I can show you that in control, but you can mark the ports as trusted or untrusted and then have your DHCP snooping. This is really nice if you want to avoid like someone plugging a router into your network and then handing out DHCP. you can tell it what ports on the switch are allowed to pass DHCP traffic. Like I said, once again, it's great for allowing or preventing somebody from accidentally plugging a DHCP server into your network. And then your switch ports, you can see right here, and you'll be able to see the status of the VLAN networks, the trunk type, and you can see here my access on corporate VLAN 10, and you'll see here 19, 21, and 23 are all bonded, and then 20, 22, and 24 are all bonded. So you can kind of see what's happening here. Now, once again, you're not designed to do these. If you're using in control, you're not gonna mess around with this configuration. The idea here is that you can do everything inside either the switch or inside in control. So when I go back to in control, I go to my device configuration page. I can show and hide my port list. And if I show the port list, you'll see here that same detailed view that I had, where I have my 19, 21, and 23 is server 1, my 20, 22, and 24 is server 2 on VLAN 10. You can also see all of your port types and the VLANs that they're associated to and the devices they're connecting. And you can see your power draw as well. So this is a basic overview. The switch is pretty new, but I just wanted to give a quick overview of VLAN tagging, DHCP snooping, STP, and link aggregation inside the peplink switch.